hoopinhoops.com. Welcome back. Don't forget, leave a like and subscribe. So let's get right into it. There are two things I wanted to touch on, both relating to the Lakers. The first is Bronny James being in the NBA. It's no secret Bronny James have no business being in the NBA. So I'm going to put that out up front. It's my belief, and I think it's the belief of many people, Bronny James has no business being in the NBA. As a person, I don't know Bronny James. I don't know his father, LeBron James, either, as a person. But that doesn't matter because I'm not speaking on them as a person. I'm speaking on the ability to play basketball, them as basketball players and NBA players I'm speaking on. And I'm not speaking on LeBron James' ability to play basketball. We know LeBron James is, you know, as good as he is. I'm speaking about Bronny James. As a person, I'm sure Bronny James is a good person. I have no reason to think otherwise. But as a basketball player, an NBA basketball player to be more specific, his game is shit. Now, I mean, think about this. Is it possible, given enough time for him to develop into being a worthy NBA basketball player? Who knows? You know, we've seen players who've not been drafted become, you know, pretty good players. Players who've been drafted. You look at Jimmy Butler, you could look at Ben Wallace. We could go down the line of players, and they've turned into quality players, good players. But we've not seen a player of, I should say, as bad as Bronny develop into, you know, a decent player. And I say that, given where Bronny James is right now and being in the NBA. But we've also not seen the amount of investment in a player as bad as Bronny James. So is it possible? Of course, it certainly is possible for him to develop into a worthy NBA player. But right now his game is shit. And I make no bones about this. Okay? Think about this for a moment. LeBron James came out and says he wants to play with his son in the NBA. Since then, the spotlight has been on Bronny. In high school, Bronny was not one of the most sought after players based on his skill. Persons were looking at him because his father said he wants to play with him. In fact, as his high school career was coming to an end, persons were not even thinking about him as an All American until at the very last moment. But then again, how do you justify his advancement towards college, towards the NBA, without him being All American? Right? And, you know, the fact that he was named All American, persons will say, well, okay, if he's named All American, he's one of the persons you look at to go to the NBA. But that is strategic. And anybody who thinks about this, really thinks about this in an objective manner, knows that, this is deliberate to show that, okay, he's getting to the NBA on the path so that Bronny's daddy will get what he wants. LeBron James will get what he wants. So you name him All American. So you say, okay, look, he goes to his name All American. He goes to college, then he goes to the NBA. But even in high school, you look at on the team he was on. He was not one of the best players on the team in high school on his own team. Now he goes to college. Obviously, he was not good enough to be in one of you know the better programs, go to the Dukes, go to the North Carolinas. As I mentioned, one of the top programs in college. And of course, if he went to one of them, he would languish on the bench. He would never see the light of day in terms of playing because he was nowhere anywhere close enough, to or good enough to receive the sort of playing time. But he plays college basketball nonetheless. We know he got injured. I'm not going to touch on that. Or I'm not going to get into that to see. But what I will say, injury aside, you know, he went to USC, the Trojans, and he was not one of the top 2 or 3 players on the team either. He was not on the scouting radar as an NBA player, other than the fact that he was LeBron James's son. Okay? Until the very last moment where a report came out that he was ranked 55. Was it 55 or 54? Something like that. I don't remember. I think it's 54. Maybe it was 54. Okay? Again, how do you justify him going to the NBA if he's not playing up to standard and we saw that he was injured? And again, look at this. When have you ever seen a player of his caliber, of his playing ability, get that sort of injury that he did? And they draft them into the NBA without allowing them to at least play another year, to show that they've recovered, that, they're playing at a particular level. But of course, given when he came back, he was also not playing at that level, and you could say, oh, well, it's because of the injury he had. If you were to give him another year, then you will say, oh, well, he had a whole year a whole following year, and he's still not playing at to that level. So what do? You rank him appropriately, and the Lakers get to draft him. Or if you want to put it in those words, give his father a gift, you know, give LeBron James the gift of having to play with his son. But then again, irrespective of his ranking, and the Lakers were the one who selected him, how do they really justify his selection other than doing a favor for Bronny's daddy? When you look at the situation that precedes, name one player that was not in the top prospect. Okay? Injury aside, performing at the level that he's playing, that was drafted into the NBA. Now I understand, of course, it's your star. You want to keep your star happy. It's the 55th or 54th pick, whatever it is, and you're saying, well, you don't expect much, but you've also at the very same time seen players selected late, as I've said before, you know, turn out into be some pretty good players. And the Lakers knew at the time they had some defensive holes. That's before they made the trades that they did. Going out and get Dorian Finney-Smith and other persons, right? I'm not even talking about the Luka was not for the on the defensive end, but but you look at the holes they had at the time. You could have at least made an attempt of getting an NBA prospect. But instead, of course, you know, to satisfy LeBron James, they went and picked Bronny James. And, the thing with nepotism is that, you know, we understand that you're being favorable to friends, relatives, that sort of things, right? In that case, LeBron James' son. But when it's in the public view the way it is, and there have players who work their tail off to try to get into the NBA. How do they feel about this? Seeing Bronny James being called before theirs. Think about the players that got invites, who are NBA worthy, who are in the green room, their name not called, but Bronny James' name is being called. How do they feel about that? Okay, but of course, you select Bronny James because his daddy wants to play with him. You know, and not just that. Even after they draft Bronny, they go about throwing in person's face, you know, public celebrations, not being self aware of the sickness of the way they're demonstrating or they're throwing, you know, the effect of nepotism in persons who've worked for a long time to get to the NBA. You're throwing that sort of thing in their face. But that's not a very good action. That's a sick action. I will tell you that. But we all saw the incompetence of Bronny James in the summer league. You know, they waited until he had one or two reasonable games and they shut him down. For the rest of the summer league. Of course, if you go further, let him play after that. His game may go back down to as poorly as it started, and you don't want persons to go back to criticizing him again. So you shut him down. But we can go further. When has any player that has not proven a thing received a guaranteed 3-year NBA contract as Bronny did? Name when. Yet they're sent to the G League. They're assigned to the G League. Now tell me that's not a gift to Bronny because of his daddy, because of Daddy LeBron. Okay? When has a player sent to the G League and given the option to fluctuate between the NBA and G League in the way Bronny has? When have they've given the opportunity to say, okay, they're playing only home games, you know? And I mentioned the fluctuations to the NBA so that they could create daddy son moments, you know, like Christmas and so forth, you know. But even in the G League, we realized in the first few games he was proven not even worthy of playing in the G League with some ridiculous stats, 5 points, some other assists and rebounds. But anybody who understands the game of basketball understands that you could inflate players' stats. You look at the games they play, the times you play them, the shots they allow, and suddenly, of course, even while he was not supposed to play road games against a particular team where he had to play multiple times. He ended up going on the road. We also saw in the time when they brought him in the NBA, he was averaging zero point 0.3 points a game, zero point 0.3 assists, and zero point 0.3 rebounds. And suddenly, when it was pointed out, you saw an adjustment in terms of how, like I said, you could manufacture points. which inflates the person's statistics. And persons will forget about the actions that took place. They will just look at the stats that existed and they will say, oh, look, he averaged 5 points or 7 points in the NBA, which is, like some of the bottom tier players, that, and they forget everything that was done specifically to create. But you got to remember this because for persons like me, I don't forget those things and I will point it out. But, and I think more recently, I believe, I hate to get into this, but that Stephen A. LeBron thing where they had that interaction. And of course, it's no secret, I'm not a big proponent of Stephen A. Smith. He said it himself. A lot of what he says is to gain ratings. And the bottom line is, which can easily be proved, is that what Stephen A. Smith says, a lot of it lacks substance. And I'll not get into to why it lacks substance because that's not the point. But does he have a right to talk about Bronny? Oh, yes, he does. Because Bronny is an NBA player at this point, irrespective of how he got there, and he has a right to talk about it. He's a shitty NBA player, but he's an NBA player nonetheless. If his daddy does not want people to talk about his son in the NBA, then he simply should not create the situation that he did. Let me also say that I don't think I forgot about JJ Redick when he said Bronny James earned his spot on the team at the start of the season, pandering to LeBron James. Let's see when the roster is being trimmed for the playoffs. Will Bronny make the team? My guess is he will make the team. The playoff roster because the playoff roster is less than the regular season roster. He will, I believe, he will make it. Hey, so that LeBron could create more daddy moments with his son. So yes. Let me touch on the other point, and that relates to Luka joining the Lakers. Okay, whatever happened that caused Luka to join the Lakers, well, so be it. What this does is that it gives the Lakers a different approach to how they face teams, right? Take Denver, for example. You move Austin Reeves, you move from, not you move Austin Reeves, but you move from Austin Reeves and Max Christie in the backcourt. And you now have Austin Reeves and Luka Doncic. Inconsistent Luka or not, whatever defensive deficiencies that may exist, the Lakers' backcourt is now more formidable. Okay? And what it could do is that it gives LeBron James more time to rest, which, of course, we know late in games, in the fourth quarter, we've seen that the last couple of years, sometimes he does not have the energy. He's getting older. I mean, it happens to all players, So hopefully he could be a bit more fresh, in the late fourth quarters, and so he could be more effective, right? But we also know when he was off the court, the offense took a drive. So now with Luka, the bleeding is not as bad. But if we focus on the comparison with Denver, for example, which is just one team, um, a team that, of course, that has knocked them out a few years, the last couple of years, we see now that the Lakers have a backcourt that is as good or better than Denver. Okay, because Denver has Braun and Murray, although Murray is a little banged up right now. Okay, then you go to the front court. You lose AD, but you have LeBron and Rui compared to Aaron Gordon and Michael Porter Jr. And I mean, whether persons disagree with me or not, my position here is that the Lakers, you know, may be a bit better than Denver from that perspective. Okay, LeBron and Rui, Aaron Gordon and Michael Porter Jr. Well, I would say LeBron and Rui is better. So whoever disagrees, I mean, it's their opinion, just like it's my opinion on that one. And I mean, I may be right or not. Of course, the Joker is better than he is, right? So and but the Joker will do his thing against anybody, whether it's AD or not AD. The question is, are the advantages in the different sports great enough to win? So whether Lakers have advantages, you know, is does that advantage outweigh where Denver has its advantages? Of course, I know it's not just player. It's not one on one, or that's how it is. And chemistry matters. Um, other factors come into play, injuries and all of those sort of things. Okay. Also, without sufficient playing time together, there may also be some hiccups. But what the change that the Lakers got does is that it invigorates the Lakers and makes them, want to see how far they can go. Meaning, um, you know, they might play with that extra step that might take them a little further than they otherwise probably would. Now, this is the other thing, right? Um, is that the person is speaking about Luca's inconsistencies, his struggles, whatever you want to call it. I'll say yes, he's inconsistent, and I don't see any surprise there. Now, there's a point that I have not heard the analysts or reporters talk about. But like I said, for me, there's no surprise there. It is not because he's playing on a different team or you have to learn the new schemes, all of those things. The main thing for me is the speed with which the team is playing. Remember when Luca was on the Dallas Mavericks and was asked the question about playing faster? And I'm going to paraphrase a little bit here. Remember his response? He mentioned that he know the team could benefit from playing faster, but he's not going to. But he's going to continue to play at the speed that he is, because for him that's where he's playing at his best. So he's going to play. So which keeps the team playing a bit slower than it actually, persons may suggest in terms of playing faster. But look at him playing right now. He is actually playing faster because he's playing on a different team. And of course, we know the trade and all what happens. At least what we know in public. Okay, and all of playing faster puts him out of his comfort zone. There will be days when the ball will go in and days when it will not, because as I said, he's playing out of his comfort zone. So he will need the off season to work on adjustments that make him more effective consistently. The hope is at this point he brings enough to meet expectations, whatever the expectations is. But at this pace, you're not going to see him backing down persons the way he did in on the Mavericks, you know, or taking his time on plays. It's a lot quicker action. So I think you will continue to see some inconsistencies throughout the season. Hoopinhoops.com.